Hello, world. Welcome to the 224th climate change emergency protest here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It is March 17th, 2023. I'm in Gettysburg, as I said. It's St. Patrick's Day here in the United States, and that's when they celebrate our Irish heritage, of which I have some, or a good amount. Um, it's always up for grabs, though. Kind of like an eighth breed or a ninth breed if you really check into my heritage, which goes all the way from Irish to English to Scottish to Welsh to French to German to Dutch to North African, actually, and Spanish, because the Spanish Armada going into Ireland and crashing back in the 1588. So actually had a grandfather that was Black Irish, which was kind of interesting. So St. Patrick's Day, celebrate the Irish. In town, the town is snarled up because people, even at lunchtime, there are tons of people in town that were participating in the drinking of and celebrating St. Patrick's. The bad part is that people end up driving drunk. So my proposal for in town, as well as a climate change proposal, is to have an extra surcharge of 10 cents a drink so you can afford a drunk bus where the bus picks up people, just does circles around town, transports people from downtown to a safe area where there are Uber drivers waiting and Lyft drivers, and then they drive you to your home. So that's my proposal with that, but I'm sure it won't happen because it makes sense. That would get people off the street, as well as kind of gear people towards a climate change point of view where you have shared rides and things like that. So right now we're experiencing the biggest crisis in human history. You wouldn't know it by lack of participation by the governments and by lack of coverage by the news medias. But, right now, this chart that I did last week, and I left it at home, it's the TikTok chart. It's the International Climate Change Table of Catastrophe. And I said that we're at 8 times the catastrophe is what we were based on 1.3 degrees Celsius increase, which is what the United Nations says we've increased since 1880. But if you use the 1750 baseline, we've increased 1.6 degrees Celsius. And that's 64 times worse catastrophes than what we had before. And that's about spot on if you look around the world as to what's happening. Americans are totally unaware because the media is not covering around the world. They say they're world news, but they cover local stuff and basketball and things like that. But they're not world news. So Americans are totally uninformed as to what's happening in the world. If this camera falls over, I'll have to go back and retrieve it and get it back up. So let's be honest, even though, politicians, let's be honest about what's happening right now. Politicians aren't talking about climate change at all. They don't mention it. They don't care. And if they do, it's for campaign purposes rather than trying to save our lives. This is the biggest event in human history. The media's not covering it. They'll report on what is happening sometimes, but they won't report why it's happening. They won't have experts on as to, telling people why this is occurring or this is occurring right now and all that stuff concerning climate change. So we have to be honest, we're going to die unless we get these politicians on board, unless you become, not necessarily you people that are listening in because you're aware, but until your friends and family become aware of what's happening, nothing's going to change. And that's the way it is. So we've entered into a world of economic impacts right now, physical impacts and suffering, and also mental impacts. The kids are suffering immensely due to what they think will happen with climate change and what they know what's coming. A lot of kids are choosing not to have children. A lot of kids are just choosing not to get married or anything like that because of this reason. So now it's becoming apparent, whether we acknowledge it or not. You're seeing catastrophes worldwide. If you all would go on YouTube and check on climate change, just type in climate change and you will see tons of information going on. Wonderful professors on there. One is Paul Beckwith, Guy McPherson, Peter Carter, all sorts of them on there, as well as Environmental Coffee House on Friday nights. Really good with Jennifer and Sandy. I think they're on tonight at 9 o'clock or so on YouTube. Worth checking out. It's called Environmental Coffee House. The Biden administration, and this is the insanity of it all. People have perceptions and dogmatic perceptions about the Republican Party and about the Democratic Party. I see no difference. Okay, both parties were pushing for this event right here. It's called the Willow Project. This is totally sinister. This is evil. This is a life-ending proposal, and what's going to happen has been approved. And what it is drilling in Alaska. It's called the Willow Project. If you don't believe me, check it out for yourself. It's 3 drill sites out of 5 that have been approved. Eventually what will happen is the other 2 drill sites will suddenly be approved too, and all of a sudden we're up to mega amounts of wells. There's 66 wells per drill site, okay? So it's up to 200 wells so far that they've approved up in the North Slope of Alaska. And what happens with that, not only the drill sites that are pumping out carbon dioxide in the atmosphere once it gets burned by automobiles or manufacturing or whatever. We don't need this. This is a 30-year project. Either you're serious about climate change and getting off fossil fuels, or you're not. Okay, obviously Joe Biden is not serious about it. Anyone in his administration is not serious about it. The media is not serious about it. No politician is serious about it. Okay, we're going to die. And you keep voting for these people, we're going to die. You understanding this? We're going to die. We're going to have a big problem here. We got a big problem developing right now. It's hard not to get frustrated at this as to what's happening. Okay, so this has gravel roads, also a mine to mine the gravel and get it on to make the roads, a processing facility, an operations center, an airstrip, hundreds of miles of ice roads, which won't work because these jerks are putting in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and allowing it to happen at such a rate that by the time they get to building these ice roads, they're going to be permafrost frozen roads that are all wavy and everything because they're no longer so frozen. Trucks will collapse into the system and everything else. It's a total cluster. And a 30-year project is not being serious about climate change at all. There should be no more 30-year projects. We don't need any more drilling. There's enough oil to go around right now in the wells they already have. Deplete those wells at the very end. And by the time you deplete the wells, you're already transitioned over to electricity. Okay, there's more to electricity than just solar power and wind power. There are many different things we can do. We're not choosing to do it because we don't have the technology or desire to change things. All the money is being pumped into the military. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, rather than research and development, and they aren't serious about it. The politicians are taking money from the fossil fuel industry as kickbacks for their campaigns, and then once they're done with their campaigns, they get in office, they kick the money back to the fossil fuel industry through subsidies. This is insanity what's going on. This is a big event, biggest event in human history, and we're going to freaking die from it. So the Willow Project, hundreds of miles of ice roads, drilling roads in addition to the regular roads. Also chillers. They're going to put these chillers along the pipeline and along the road to get cold air from the atmosphere to re-chill the permafrost that they just unfroze, hoping that the chillers will be warm enough with the air, which it won't be, and the friggin' permafrost roads and everything will also collapse, as I said earlier. So this is whether you acknowledge it or not. I don't care. You know what? We're at the point where you keep voting for these knuckleheads and these chuckleheads for office, and we're going to die because of it. You're uninformed as to what's happening. Quit voting blue check liberal and red check this and red check that. Okay? All your politicians are evil right now as to what's happening. There's very few, very, very few that are honest enough to stand up against these groups and say, no, this is not right. And actually, I retract that. There isn't anyone honest enough to stand up. You've got to stand up all the time, and you can't go along with any of these projects. So that's the way that is. So on the North Slope of Alaska, you got herds of musk oxen, caribou, migratory birds by the millions, and polar bears. Okay, this is what's going to be lost initially, and then what happens in the long run is that you and I will die, your kids will die, everyone you know is going to die. So the Willow Project is going to pump out 200,000 barrels a day. They're saying it's $180 million barrels a day or whatever. I did the math on it at 200,000 barrels a day at 30 years, 365 days a year. That's 2 billion barrels of oil being pumped out. They're saying it's only going to be 60 million or 60. I don't know what the number is. Anyways, I did the calculations. 2 billion barrels total over 30 years. That's equal to 200 coal plants coming online. Okay, you understand what's going on. The government even acknowledges that there's 60 coal plants coming online. This is insanity. This is voting for these chuckleheads again. They're all chuckleheads, okay? They're evil. They're sick. This is sinister. This is all about money and power and getting reelected. This does not have anything to do with you or me or our survival. Somehow these lizard people have gone into the realm of voting for money over people. This is insanity what's happening. Right now, you got floods in Turkey after they had the massive earthquake. This is just a small sampling here. You got a massive drought in Europe. It didn't snow this year in Europe, basically. All the way from, I think it's eastern Italy, all the way into Spain, up through France, and then east again into Europe, into the eastern part of Europe. California had 14 atmospheric rivers since December. That means, like, if you turned on a giant fire hose and shot it at California and the West Coast, you're going to have a massive amount of rain and snow coming into that area. Some places have had 51 feet of snow. Okay, this isn't crazy what's going on with the weather. You've had rain, floods. This is just California. Landslides, collapses, snow up to 50 feet. 22 drownings so far, just the ones who are reporting. 13 deaths due to people being trapped in their homes and dying that way. I mean, what a horrible death. Cyclone Freddy that was in the eastern part of Africa around Madagascar. It hit Madagascar twice. It lasted 38 days so far. I think it finally dissipated. And in Malawi, right across from Madagascar, you had 225 dead. Okay, so the people are dying. People are physically suffering, economically suffering, and mentally suffering. You still have the drought going on in Kenya, as far as I know, where thousands of people are dying every day. Right? China had flooding yesterday and hailstorms. Chile has had wildfires this spring, or their fall. Okay, right now. New Zealand has had floods and an earthquake as well. Now, around what's happening in the Atlantic right now is something. It's something that's never happened in human history, as far as I can tell. You got a seaweed blob. Okay, it stretches all the way from the coast of Africa to the Caribbean. Okay, it's 5,000 miles wide. That's wider than two widths of the United States, and you're not being told about that on the media either, and the effects of what's going to happen with that. So it's going to float eventually into the Gulf of Mexico and then onto the west coast of Florida. And the potentiality of that, after the 5,000 mile wide seaweed blob hits Florida, it has the potential of choking out light, which will kill the coral reefs. If it dies on shore, once it dies, it gives off hydrogen sulfide gas, which is lethal to mammals and aerobic, anything that breathes air, okay, oxygen, things like that. Air quality problems at the very least. They're saying it's going to be air quality problems. I say it could be more severe than that. You could have people dying from inhaling sulfur dioxide. Okay, I'm sorry, hydrogen sulfide. If you get too much of that, it'll kill you totally. At the very least, you're going to end up with severe lung problems. Hydrogen sulfide is lethal to mammals as well. So in the past, the Permian mass extinction, PETM, you had 96% of sea life die. This is 250 million years ago. 96% of sea life and 90% of life on Earth died. Get it? 96%. 90% of life on Earth. It's like, okay, where is everybody? So the result of that was from warmer oceans, from volcanoes erupting, spewing CO2 in the air. So what we're doing now is doing the job of the volcanoes and all the previous gunk that had extincted life before. You understand, oil is that gunk, basically, that died. And we're shooting that back into the atmosphere. And what can be the result of that? That is not good air. We're in big trouble. Back then, you had the volcanoes, which made warmer oceans and less oxygen in the oceans itself, and there's no overturning in the ocean. So the ocean started dying. That is exactly where we are right now. Subtract out the volcano issue, put in our burning of carbon dioxide, putting carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and this is where we are. It's the same situation. Okay, so there were dead zones in the oceans at that time, which now we had at least 14 dead zones as of 2017, I think it was. I don't know how many are out there now. Bacteria in the ocean then strips oxygen from the water and the sulfur oxide in the water, and it leaves behind hydrogen sulfide. Okay, that's what happens with the ocean once this starts happening with the bacteria. Hydrogen sulfide kills aerobic organisms. It destroys the ozone layer once it gets up into the ozone. It strips out the ozone layer, okay? And if you don't have an ozone layer, then you get more ultraviolet light. You fell over. Hold on, I'll save you. So you get, once the hydrogen sulfide gets into the atmosphere, it strips out the ozone layer, okay? And So what happens with that then is that you get more ultraviolet light penetrating from the sun down to the earth, which just totally messes up the DNA of creatures down below. And this is what happened during the PETM, permanent mass extinction. God dang it. Let's see here. I'll put you in a different spot. I'll put you right here. Maybe that'll help. Okay. So you have the ultraviolet light. This is ridiculous. All right. Let's go on the other side. Sorry about that. So you have the ultraviolet light. Jesus Christ, you got that backwards. Hold on.
Mission disaster.
Okay, I'll do it from this side. All right, so you had the ultraviolet light, which penetrates to the Earth's surface, and then that results in the destruction of DNA of creatures, okay? So they don't survive when it's like that. And let's see if I can do it this way. So once the ultraviolet light starts striking the ground, then you also end up with methane not being destroyed in the atmosphere, which usually it requires all the ozone layer to destroy the methane. So with more methane in the atmosphere, you end up with more heat. And with more heat, you get the feedback loop, which leads to more death of the oceans, because the heating in the oceans absorbing the heat and having less oxygen being stripped out by the bacteria, and this hydrogen sulfide escaping into the atmosphere. So it's a whole cycle going on. If you get that ultraviolet light situation going, that's probably, it's a radiation, and probably is the end of all life on Earth as well. So this is one of the papers that was put out in 2005, I think, by Penn State, and they're saying this is what happened in the past. People don't attribute that they think it was all carbon dioxide, and it wasn't. Carbon dioxide ends up being the trigger, but the methane and the hydrogen sulfide and the ultraviolet light is the bullet. So right now, the military budget in the United States, 65%, this Biden projected budget that he's proposing, 65% is going to the military, Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, and the VA. It's $1.1 trillion. People don't know this. 65% of our budget is going to go there. This is basically the end of the American century, what's happening right now. This mirrors Rome totally as to what they did. They went totally militaristic, and they didn't provide services for their people, and the whole system started breaking down. So don't pretend this is saving democracy or something like that, because it's not. What's happening is that this is pure greed. We're into a warmongering country, and you look on our news right now, and you can tell that this is not a good situation. What's happening? We're not all about preserving democracy throughout the world. Don't kid yourself. What's happening? It's a propaganda statement saying that this is all about democracy and preserving the democracy throughout the world. It's not. This is pure greed. What's happening? We're just looking to make money through the arms industry, and it's sickness as to what's happening. It's pure evil. And you got to call out your own party on that. You got to quit. And these are both parties in the United States that are participating in this. And I'm just blaming the United States because Europe's participating too. But the United States is the tiger that's wagging the tail of the world right now. And it's very scary as to what's happening. The Chinese are going to take over because they're the ones that are seen being the leaders in the world. And we've just given it away. We've given away our right to have ownership as to being a leader in the world. And this is not even hiding it anymore. This is transparent sickness that's going on, transparent warmongering that's going on. So right now we have no worldwide action concerning climate change. There are no world leaders that are leading the fight against climate change and keeping us from dying. It's the biggest event in human history, not happening. There's no activists being covered by the media. The media doesn't cover anything like this. This is number 224. No one's ever talked to me about anything or even grabbed my stuff. The only ones that ever did was Environmental Coffee House that actually put it on their website. And that was like 2 years ago or whatever. So that was very wonderful when they did that, even though it wasn't the best of my broadcast, but it was pretty nice. So there's no college protests. There's no high school protests as to what's going on. There are no parent protests. There are no grandparent protests. There are no husband and wives protests. So I did this chart last week. I'll show it next week. This is called the TikTok chart. And it's all about, and I talked about it at the beginning here, but it's all about the level of catastrophes that keep increasing at a doubling. Okay, so every so many tenths of a degree increase in temperature, you're doubling the amount of catastrophes that's happening. What's going to happen is it's going to pick up at a faster and faster rate, because with feedback loops, the increase in temperature is going to happen faster and faster and faster. And we're in a horrible situation right now with no leaders. In fact, we have leaders that are totally sick, and we're gonna all end up dying. So that's the way it is. And it's not going to be some pretty death where you just wake up and die or whatever, or don't ever wake up. It's going to be a horrible starvation type thing, social unrest. You name it, if you can think of it, the worst of humanity, and that's what's going to happen in the world, and especially here in the United States, since we have so many guns. So we've passed into a cataclysm. Okay, so we've gone from any possibility of saving ourselves right now, that we've pushed ourselves into a cataclysm, and there's no indication that we're going to change our ways. So 2023 is the year of reckoning, where the cost of evil and inaction becomes apparent. You know, and this is very clear whether you see it or not. All right, it's all you got to do is connect the dots as to what's happening, and you can see how bad it is. And you've really got to get on YouTube and check out the news on there. Type in climate change, as I said. Type in Paul Beckwith, Peter Carter, Environmental Coffee House. That's a real good start to things. So I'll catch you next week. That'll be number 225. That'll be on March. Let's see, today's 17th, that'll be March 24th next week. Hopefully you're able to hang in there while the camera fell over 3 or 4 times. We'll see you later. Bye.